Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. On behalf of the Combat Antisemitism Movement Europe, I'm very pleased to welcome you to this webinar dedicated to understanding contemporary antisemitism, how it evolves, how it spreads, and why it increasingly threatens not only Jewish communities, but also democratic societies as a whole. Since January 1st, 2026, approximately 2,380 anti-Semitic incidents have already been recorded worldwide, according to our Anti-Semitism Research Center. But beyond the numbers, what is particularly alarming today is the normalization of anti-Semitism in public discourse, online spaces, universities, demonstrations, and even sometimes within political narratives. Anti-Semitism, of course, is not new, but it constantly adapts to its times. And the purpose of today's conversation is precisely to better understand this mechanism, where contemporary anti-Semitism comes from, how traditional tropes are being repackaged, how anti-Zionism can sometimes become a vehicle for anti-Semitism, and what democratic societies can do to confront this phenomenon without ambiguity. And to discuss this today, I'm truly honored to moderate this discussion alongside two outstanding speakers whose expertise and experience are particularly valuable in this issue. Our first speaker is Her Excellency Isabelle Rome, French Ambassador for Human Rights and for the Remembrance of the Holocaust. A former minister and magistrate, Ambassador Rome has dedicated her career to justice, equality, human rights, and the fight against discrimination. And through your current role, dear Ambassador, you play an important part in France's efforts to preserve Holocaust memory and combat anti-Semitism and hate in all its forms. Thank you very much for being with us
Thank
today.
you.
We are also honored to welcome Richard Schneider. Richard is a journalist, filmmaker, author, and Middle East specialist currently serving as press officer. Over the course of his career, he served as bureau chief and chief correspondent in Tel Aviv for ARD, worked as Middle East correspondent for Der Spiegel, and covered major geopolitical development across Europe and the Middle East for decades. Your perspective, dear Richard, on Germany, Israel, media narratives, and European public opinion is particularly important in this current context. Thank you very much for joining us today as well.
Thank you.
My first question will go for Isabelle. As Ambassador for Human Rights and for the Remembrance of the Holocaust, how do you assess the current evolution of anti-Semitism in France and Europe? Thank you.
So, good afternoon and good morning. No, good afternoon. I'm very happy to exchange with you about this so important issue, and thank you to you, dear channel, for organizing this exchange. I'm very happy to exchange with you. The resurgence in anti-Semitic acts and traits that has been amplified since the terror attacks perpetrated by Hamas in Israel on October the 7th, 2023, is a great challenge for every country represented in many democracies. France, is home to the largest Jewish community in Europe, and this increase in anti-Semitic traits is taken very seriously by French public authorities. As ambassador for the remembrance of the Holocaust, my work is very specific, and perhaps I can speak about two directions. The first one is the organizations of dialogues with several countries, and for example, we have a bilateral dialogue with Germany to fight against anti-Semitism. We have a bilateral dialogue with United States, and we have a dialogue with Israel to fight against anti-Semitism. And it's very important to exchange best practices and to have joint roadmaps um, on this issue. Perhaps the second thing which is very important is the participation of France at the IRA, the International Alliance for the Holocaust Remembrance. And as you know, France will have the presidency of IRA next year in 2027. And it's a very important thing because we are working for this presidency with all the members of the French delegations, and the members are all the sites of memories, like the memorial of the Shoah, le Camp des Milles, la Maison des Enfants d'Isieux, and so we are working very strongly for this presidency. Perhaps can I also say that so I am very for me, so it's very important to promote the use of the definition of anti-Semitism of IRA. And that's why we launched a new vademecum for all teachers. So this vademecum was made by the Ministry of the Education Nationale, of the Education. And in this vademecum, the definition of anti-Semitism of IRA is clearly explained in this vademecum. And I think it's very important because all the teachers can know very precisely what is this definition.
Thanks a lot for this specific message, especially about like the higher definition, because as we can see in Europe, and that was also like the basis of this webinar, is that many people don't even know what the higher definition is. So thanks a lot for clarifying this. That's very valuable. My next question will be to Richard Schneider. Richard, so you particularly know and master the German environment. And my first question will be like very basic. How safe is life for Jews in Germany today? Are they like considering leaving? What's the state of anti-Semitism in Germany today?
So first of all, thank you very much, Shannon, for having me here today. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. Well, the German Jewish community is the third biggest in Europe after France and the UK. And the situation is, as well as in France, as well as in the UK, getting worse and worse. Berlin is meanwhile in Europe the city with the highest percentage and the highest amount of anti-Semitic incidents. And many Jews in Berlin especially are considering leaving the city, not necessarily leaving Germany, but leaving the city. You might know that there are also some 30,000, approximately 30,000 Israelis living there, and many of them don't dare to speak Hebrew anymore in the streets because you have also in Berlin approximately 800,000 Muslim inhabitants, and the situation in certain parts of the city became very dangerous and very difficult. So Berlin is a really difficult place to be, but also in other areas in Germany, the situation is getting worse, like everywhere else in Europe, and especially in Western Europe. And yes, many people, many Jewish people are considering leaving Germany for good. Not only because of the anti-Semitism of the left and of Muslim Islamist groups, but also because there's the danger that the German right-wing, extreme right-wing party AfD might win elections. We have now in fall state elections, and there are at least 2 states in the east which might become an AfD government, especially Sachsen-Anhalt. And in 3 years, we have new general elections in Germany, and the polls are saying already now for quite some time that the AfD is the strongest party, and so many Jews are very afraid that this party might take over, go into a coalition, maybe with the conservative CDU, which this party till now says no way that this is going to happen. But nobody really can say that for sure, what is going to happen in a few years. So the situation also in Germany is becoming more and more difficult for Jewish citizens.
Very clear and unfortunately a pessimistic situation as you can describe it, unfortunately. But thanks a lot for this clarification, Richard. My next question will now be to Isabelle, but I just wanted to remind those who decided to join us today, and thank you again for that, that this webinar will also be available with a replay on our YouTube channel. And you also have the possibility to ask questions on the chat. And we will have some minutes at the end of this webinar to take some of your questions. So please feel free to ask your questions in the chat. Isabelle, my next question will be for you. When it comes to anti-Semitism today, we often speak about like freedom of speech. And that's also like the topic that was like kind of addressed by some political parties and so on. We can see it especially in France with the Yadan law, which was a law against anti-Semitism that a French member of the parliament wanted to make adopted. It was then removed, and the government decided to work on this specific law against anti-Semitism because some members of the left says it was like kind of a break to an obstacle to the freedom of speech. My next question will be the following: how can democratic societies balance freedom of expression with the need to combat hate speech and online radicalization?
2 things perhaps. So in France, we have a specific law which recognizes the freedom of speech. And this law is very old. This is a law of 1881, yes. But in this law, there are some limits to this freedom. And for example, one of these limits is the hate, the incitation to the hate, and the hate because of the religions, the color, and so on. So the freedom exists, the freedom of speech exists, is a very high principle of our republic, but is in the law limited. So it's very important to know that, because we can condemn people for anti-Semitic purposes, speeches. It's possible, and we would like to go further. Caroline Yadan proposed a law to include several measures aimed at combating new forms of anti-Semitism, and imposing stricter penalties for distorting the memory of the Holocaust. And in particular, and it's very interesting, this law aims to prohibit calls for the destruction of state, in line with the practical implementation of the IRA's working definition. But as you know, the bill is currently being drafted, and we hope, because there was a very high opposition in the parliament, and the government wants to continue, doesn't want to retire this proposition, and that's why the government works actually on a new draft of the proposition, which will become a project also. And I sincerely hope that a new debate, because there was no debate, a debate will be organized in the parliament in a few weeks or months.
Understood. Thanks a lot for this kind of state of play. So when it comes to this law about anti-Semitism in France, and it also leads me like to my next question for Richard, which is about like Israel. And we can definitely see that when we are like analyzing anti-Semitism, there is like anti-Semitism before October 7, but also after October 7, 2023, and the link to Israel. So my question for you, Richard, will be like, what role does Germany is coming to terms with its past play in the debate surrounding Israel?
First of all, I would contradict what you just said, because you just said there is a kind of anti-Semitism before 7th of October and after. I wouldn't agree completely, because in the outburst and what happened after October 7th, definitely the outburst and the size and the amount of anti-Semitic incidents,
Yeah.
meanwhile, all over the world are uncomparable to the situation before. But we saw these developments, let's say, for example, already in the third Gaza war in 2014, when there were demonstrations, not only in Germany, but also in France, in Paris, where people who were demonstrating against Israel, which is, of course, their right to do, were demonstrating and attacking synagogues in Germany or synagogues in France, synagogues of German Jewish citizens or of French Jewish citizens. So they didn't make the distinction. And there was a demonstration in Berlin in 2014, one of many where you could hear different slogans, where they were yelling Hamas, Hamas, Jews into the gas. So that was a kind of connecting Jews in general with Israel. So that is a development which is not really specifically new. But the situation has worsened like everywhere else. And then there is in Germany, of course, there's a very specific issue here, and that is the German past. And the whole history of the way how Germany is dealing with its past, that would take several hours to explain. But what we see from generation to generation are two different developments. On one hand, Germany really dealt with its past and admitted its guilt and tried a lot to make due to what happened in the Holocaust, and also has developed what is called a culture of memory. Erinnerungskultur is the German word. But what we have seen with the last, let's say, 20 years, that it became more and more formal, that it became a situation where all these memorials and the special events concerning the memory of the Holocaust have become something which the state did, but not necessarily the people themselves. And especially younger people who are more and more detached to the past, which is now already 80 years, more than 80 years ago, start to have difficulties really to understand the importance, first of all, of remembering, but not only of remembering, but being conscious of the history of the Holocaust to avoid similar developments in the future. And there is another issue here, which is now strongly debated in Germany. We have more and more German citizens who are originally not from Germany or not of German descent, but they're German citizens. Many of them, of course, Muslims, and they say, well, why do we have to remember the Holocaust, which we didn't do? So there is a huge debate now going on in the public discourse what it means for the future. And so, in this whole debate, we have also, of course, in the young generation, a lot of people who are still very conscious about their responsibility, not for the past, but for a better future. But you have now also deep discussions concerning especially this government in Israel, and especially the way this government was waging war in Gaza, but also now in Lebanon and Iran, where the comparison between what happened during the Holocaust and what happened now in Gaza is partly in Germany also a debate and a discussion to get rid of the own guilt feeling. And there were slogans time and again of a very progressive left in Germany, youngsters who were demonstrating, also partly in university, yelling, "Free Palestine of German guilt." So you see here the connection between a difficulty to deal with it with their own past and with the situation right now in the Middle East. You can criticize whatever you want in the Middle East, and that's everybody's right to do. And there's a lot to criticize, no question about it. But this linkage between the Holocaust and the Middle East, that is a problem which you find, of course, in Germany a lot, but you see similar developments also in other countries.
Absolutely. Like there is also, as you say, like the kind of the mix between Israel and Jews, which is at first like obvious, but that nurture anti-Semitism. And we can definitely see it from our data that we can unveil and the incidents that we can track through our anti-Semitism research center. Like there is like a huge part of incidents that are like happening since October 7, 2023. And that was my point, that are linked to Israel. You know what I mean? And we even have like some a large number of incidents that are anti-Semitic that did like that have inside like the word Palestine, for example. So the link, unfortunately, is obvious. Thank you, Richard. My next question will be to you, Isabel. So Richard told us about like the Holocaust remembrance and such, and my question will be like the following. How important, according to you, is Holocaust remembrance in combating contemporary forms of anti-Semitism, particularly among younger generations?
I think that it's a crucial issue, and the survivors are not are very rare today, and we can find a new ways to transmit this memory of the Holocaust. That's why. The project of our French presidency is a project with the youth, and we will ask to young people, so with the help of our memorial sites, to propose some contents about remembrance of the Holocaust, and it could be pictures, it could be a podcast. So a lot of kinds of contents, and we will work for this with our partners, with the memorial sites, but also with the Ministry of Education, because it's a very important issue to transmit this remembrance. And so someone say that is that the transmission of the remembrance is not really efficient to combat anti-Semitism. But I disagree with this approach because I think that when we meet some people, some survivors, but also with sons of or daughters of survivors, when we can go to the camps of Auschwitz, for example, we are not the same people. And I think that the transmission of the memory can make for every people a declic, and could be very important to understand what the anti-Semitism can be, what the anti-Semitism can produce. And I think that the transmission of the Holocaust remembrance is also important to prevent anti-Semitism, even if it's not on the only the onlyest way to prevent anti-Semitism. What I would like to say after hearing Richard is to repeat, and I think it's important to repeat that the fight against anti-Semitism is unconditional, and we can disagree with the government of Israel. We can disagree with several measures, but the Jewish people mustn't be blamed for the conflict, and it's very important to repeat that, and to repeat this unconditionality of the fight against anti-Semitism.
Absolutely, and thank you for the clarification, which is really needed in this time. So thanks a lot for making this clear, dear ambassador. I suggest now that we can maybe move to some questions that have been asked by those people who decided to join us today. And my first question would be to you, Richard. And I'm reading it. It's from Miriam. I'm participating from Zurich. The situation also in Switzerland is becoming also more and more concerning, but probably comparing with UK, Germany, or France, it's slightly more concealed. Now my question to Richard Schneider, can you tell us more about your concern about AFD? Could it become worse with them? If yes, why?
Thank you for the question. It would be way too early to make already clear statements where this is going to go, especially if we're talking about national elections, which is still 3 years away. But we saw now that the AfD has published a governmental program if they will take over the state of Sachsen-Anhalt, and where they say very clearly what they want to do. It doesn't mean necessarily that they will be able to do this, because some things that they want to do are not in the hands of a state, but in the hands of the national government. And of course, there will be people who will go to the Court of Constitution, and then there will be lots of legal issues. But what they want to do is, and what they say, is that basically they want to go against migrants. They want to go, in parts, they're discussing even the issue to revoke citizenship from Germans who have a migration background. But this is still, everything is still very unclear what they really plan to do there, what they want to do. But where they are very specific is, for example, that they want to stop funding culture the way culture is now funded in Sachsen-Anhalt, and they want to fund more German national culture. Everybody knows what it means in Germany, but it's also still in a form of verbal expressions that you can't really put the finger on it, even though everybody knows what it means. What they also want to do is to intensify the connections to Russia, that schools shall go on trips to Moscow, etc., etc. We do know that there are connections Moscow with a lot of right-wing parties all over Europe. So this is no surprise. But what we can see is a renationalization of the states, what they are planning, and the renationalization means, in a way, what a very old right-wing German thinking means. And partly they are using also expressions which, when we go back to histories, are very well known, but they use it in a form that you can never really blame them or really attack them for it, but still everybody understands exactly what is said.
Yeah, got it. Thanks a lot, Richard. My next question will be for you, Isabelle, from Eva. How can non-Jews in Europe help countering hate narratives? I am a teacher and provide facts, figures, and real story to students, but I feel it's not enough. We need more visibility countering hate. My full support to the Jewish community. So basically, what can we do as a teacher, for example, to counter anti-Semitism?
Yes, it's an important question, and thank you, Eva, for this question and for your implication as teacher to fight against anti-Semitism. Naturally, one way is the transmission of the Holocaust remembrance, but I think that what could be efficient is the promotion of Jewish life and to speak about Jewish writers, Jewish musicians, Jewish intellectuals, and so on. And I think it's important to speak about the Jewish community, not only as victims, but as very important actors of our societies, Germany, Switzerland, France, and in all countries of Europe, we know that Jewish people have and had very important missions, very important made very important things to make progress and to bring very important things to our societies. And I think the promotion of Jewish life and the promotion of all what the Jewish people can do could be an important thing. And I think so. We speak very frequently with my colleague of the Ministry of Education, and I think that the Ministry of Education thinks very seriously about this way to fight against anti-Semitism through the promotion of Jewish life and the promotion of Jewish personalities.
And Isabelle, also, if I may, I remember that you also published a vademecum, kind of a guide, a book in France that will be like delivered to schools. Can you tell us more about this?
Yes, so it is a very important vademecum. Perhaps, so I am with Anaïs, my advisor. Perhaps we can share the link. So Shannon, perhaps
Sure.
I can share the link to this vademecum. So of course it's French, but I think it could be a very useful tool. And in this vademecum, so there are uh, some tools so to help teachers to fight to transmit a lot of notions to the children against racism and anti-Semitism, because the vademecum is specifically against racism and anti-Semitism. But I can share the link if you are interested on that.
Absolutely, and we will also be able to share it with all the people
Yes,
who could
yes.
not join us today with the network. With great pleasure. Thank you. So we have many questions. Unfortunately, we won't have time to answer to all, but I will take the following one, which will be for Richard. It's a question from Alberto, which is the following. Anti-Semitism is being promoted and it is increasing worldwide, for example, in the media, in social networks, in labor unions and universities sponsored by those countries that are proud to do it. What is being done and what else should be done in these instances to put the anti-Semites in the uncomfortable conditions that are Jews today all over the world? Shouldn't we expose their mindset, their villainy, while we defend ourselves from their hate and lies? That's a question for you, Richard, from Alberto.
I'm not sure that I really understood. I really understood the question, the essence of the question. He's basically asking what Jews should do. Is that the question?
Like, what should be the solution in order to fight this kind of networks that are like promoting anti-Semitism? Like,
Oh,
should we
okay.
expose their mindset? Like, what should be the answer to counter this kind of hates that are like nurtured within universities, within labor unions and such? Yeah.
Look, I unfortunately, my optimism about education is not that high. So I believe that, and we see it. We see what's happening right now. So when we look at the period after 1945, how especially in Germany, but also all over Europe, um, there were so many activities going on, private activities, cultural activities, political activities, to make people understand what the Holocaust was, what anti-Semitism is, and why anti-Semitism is something which is an absolute no-go, not only because of the Jews themselves, but also in any liberal society, that this is something which at the end will hurt the whole society, not only the Jews. And there were lot of efforts were done, but look where we are today. So I have my skepticism how much education can really help. However, and it's a little bit the work of Sisyphus, you don't have any other choice. There is no other tool than to do and to continue. And for that, yes, you need to have a much broader work to do to educate not only every single person, but to educate especially also the so-called what we call multiplicators. When I look to teachers in German schools, and I guess it's not much different in France or anywhere else, I get very often the requests to come and talk and to help them, first of all, to understand what to do with anti-Semitic incidents in their classes, because they themselves are very insecure when it comes to the issue, what is anti-Semitism, what is anti-Zionism, etc., etc. So I think there is a need where, starting from top down, the state has really to invest a lot of money in this kind of education of multiplicators, because they are missing basic tools, basic informations, and basic knowledge. The other thing is what we also do know, and which meanwhile, especially in the Anglo-Saxon countries, is much more in the conscious than in other countries, is that a lot of Arab countries like Qatar, like the Saudis, etc., are investing millions into Anglo-Saxon universities, especially into the humanities, to spread their narrative. And this is something which only now in the last 2 years has become also common knowledge. Of course, there are people who know about it, but very little was done against it. So there is a lot of work which has to be done. We have also to be very aware that this is not something that will have an effect in a year or in 2 or in 5. This is a very long-term project. So until this might change the attitude and the mindset, we will definitely also have to see that politics, but also justice, has to react accordingly. And we see in France, we see in Germany very often verdicts when it comes to anti-Semitic incidences and acts, which are not only questionable, but also very problematic and send into the society very often the very wrong message. So that's also where justice and politicians and judges really have to do some soul search and do quite a lot of work themselves.
Absolutely. Thank you, Richard. Like both pillars, education and justice, especially. And I think we don't speak enough about like justice, especially from France. I can see it. Like there are some results or some justice decision that are like not recognizing the anti-Semitic kind of part of an attacks. And at some point it cannot be very well understood by the population. So we are many people coming. I suggest that the questions we are not able to answer today, maybe you can send it to me over email. I would send you my email on the Slack channel so that you can maybe send me your questions and maybe I can discuss it with our both speakers, Richard and Isabel. But maybe a last question for you, Isabel, because we summarize this webinar, which is from Julia. Thank you for the webinar and thought-provoking discussions. I often hear the statement that Jews are using the Holocaust as a justification of their own genocide in Gaza, or that, I quote, October 7 is used as a justification of genocide in Gaza. The question of Julia is the following. How would you explain the twist of this narrative?
It's difficult to explain that, but what is clear that this narrative could be accepted, and in the draft of the law of Caroline Adam, so there is a point, but I don't know if this point will be in the new draft of the government, but there was a specific draft about the distortion of the memory and the utilization of the term of genocide, but I don't know if this point will be in the new draft of the proposition of the project of the law. But we can't accept these narratives. Perhaps I could say that we try to reinforce the trainings of the judges, specifically to be sure that the anti-Semitic acts can be perhaps more often condemned, and that the circumstance of anti-Semitism must be very precisely defined by the judges. And that's why it's important to reinforce trainings to judges and to the policemen to have more efficiency to this repression of anti-Semitism. Yes, that I can say.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. So we are now unfortunately running out of time. So I would like to thank you again to both of our speakers for this rich and insightful discussion. Thank you to all of those who join us today for this webinar. And what we can see is that one thing is clear, anti-Semitism is no longer confined to the margins. Unfortunately, it is adapting to new codes, new platforms, and new political narratives. That's why we decided to organize this webinar in order to better understand with you how it evolves. And thank you as well for giving us not only the tools to better understand contemporary anti-Semitism, but also concrete ways to confront it through education, vigilance, dialogue, and civic courage. And we do believe at the Combat Antisemitism Movement at the end that this fight is not only about like protecting Jewish communities, as you reminded it, it's like about defending democratic societies where hatred and intimidation never become normalized. And despite the challenges that we discussed tonight, I think that we need to remain optimistic. Across Europe, more and more voices are fortunately standing up, speaking out and refusing indifference. And yeah, thank you all very much for joining us today. And the replay will be shared shortly. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye. Au revoir.
Goodbye. Au revoir.